So I'm really, really delighted to be here with Vidyamala Burch. Vidyamala and I are old friends. We've known each other for a very long time. We're both members of the Triratna Buddhist order and both have been for a very long time. But more pertinently, so far as this discussion is concerned, Vidyamala many years ago founded an organization called Breathworks, which helps people to manage chronic pain and other issues by way of mindfulness training. And I believe, Vidyamala, you'll say more perhaps, that you've trained hundreds of thousands or 100,000 people in the approach. You've trained a large body of teachers to deliver it. It's been hugely successful. It's been taken up in the UK very widely in all sorts of interesting sectors. And you've been honoured for your work. You've received an OBE, which is an honour bestowed by the monarch or someone acting on behalf of the monarch for services to the community. Something like, I guess, the Congressional Medal of Honour for those living outside of the UK. So it's a very high honour. And I'm personally honoured that you've been willing to give us your time and enter into this discussion with us. I'd love to talk to you about, well, so many things. I'd love to talk to you about your work, your experience, both inside and outside of meditation, because I think of you as a dedicated practitioner of mindfulness with a deep understanding. And I'd love to know how you got here, how you understand where you are, where you're going with this, and something about awakening experiences as they may or may not have shown up in your life. I know that this term awakening experience might lead us into slightly controversial water together, and I hope we'll have an interesting discussion around that. So, enough from me. Maybe you could begin by telling us a little bit about yourself from your perspective.
Well, first of all, thank you for interviewing me. It's a real privilege to be here with you. And as you say, we're old friends, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation about these topics because they're very, very important, I think. You know, how we show up in the world, what we're doing with our minds, how that affects our experience of life, what we're doing for other people, how connected we are, and all those kind of things. So yeah, a little bit about me. I was born in New Zealand, and I always like to say that. It's interesting, I still kind of identify, I think, as a New Zealander, and I know you're from South Africa.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have a similar thing, but I think that I lived in New Zealand for the first 30 years of my life, and that strongly conditioned me in terms of love of nature, love of the outdoors, an appreciation of a clear blue sky, which is less frequent here in this country. But that's, of course, a very traditional metaphor for the sort of awakened mind, the clear blue sky. And I've got a vivid sense of that from my childhood, the sight of the sky. And I was very active as a child, very sporty, roamed around the hills, very privileged in a way. Growing up in New Zealand in the 60s was a very fortunate upbringing. I mean, you know, we had the usual problems that one has, but the circumstances were very benign and very free. I loved the mountains. Did a lot of what's called trimping in New Zealand, which is, I think hill walking would be too tame a translation, but it's getting out in the wilds and some of my happiest times. And then when I was 16, I injured my spine. So that was a very sort of major event in my life. I went from being this very fit, active, sporty, super fit girl who took her body completely for granted. You know, I never really thought about, you know, my body or how fit I was. I just would bounce out of bed in the morning and go for a run and play hockey and play tennis and climb mountains. So suddenly I was confronted by this thing I'd taken for granted no longer serving me in the same way. I had major surgery when I was 17. That went wrong. I had more major surgery 6 months later. I had a year off school, very crucial time, equivalent of A levels in the UK, which meant it sort of disrupted my whole educational trajectory. I never went to university, which I'd always thought I would. I was left with chronic pain. At that point, my mobility was still pretty good, but it was the beginning of this life of a body that hurts, which, I hadn't had that experience prior to that. Then when I was 23, I was a passenger in a car accident, where the driver went to sleep at the wheel, drove into a lamppost on the open road at speed, and I fractured another part of my spine along with other injuries. I was 23 and my back was pretty messed up by these two separate incidents. I also got very bad whiplash, and you don't really want to get whiplash when your spine's fused because there's nowhere for that energy to go. So it was all very jammed up. Then when I was 25, I had a kind of breakdown, really. My response for those first 10 years of this body not serving me was to push. And I've now learned through talking to lots of other people, this is a very common response to catastrophe. You just go into denial, you pretend it hasn't happened. I was in a way trying to prove that I could do more than anyone else. So I was very, very driven and very pushy. So the energy I had was very strivey. And of course you can't keep that up forever. So I went to see a doctor eventually. I'd sort of given up on doctors as well, and my mother eventually persuaded me to see another spinal consultant. And he said to me, just go home and go to bed, have 2 weeks of complete bed rest, and then come back if you haven't got any improvement. So of course I went to bed and collapsed. Very interesting. It's a bit, you push and you push and you push. And then it was like someone had just pulled out the plug. So then I had several months, more or less bedridden. Then I had more treatment. I had some injections into my spine. They went wrong. They had lost the x-rays and they injected into the spinal joints that I haven't got anymore. So then I ended up with a paralysed bladder. And it was, again, very traumatic, very frightening. I was really weak, very bewildered, and ended up in hospital as an emergency, of course. And after a couple of days, they moved me into intensive care because some of my bloods were coming back with very, I think probably they suspected a raging infection. I still don't quite know what was going on, but it was enough for them to think I needed to go into an intensive care ward. And I had an experience in the intensive care ward that was, in a way, the main beginning of this journey of reframing my life, valuing the mind, unraveling a lot of my assumptions about who I am and how the world is. So the experience was, I had some more investigations, and I needed to sit up for 24 hours after these investigations. Now, I hadn't sat up for months. So it was so interesting. I mean, it didn't feel interesting at the time. It just felt hellish. But I had the situation where I had to do something that I couldn't do.
Right.
See, that's so fascinating for the mind, having to do something that you can't do. And I'm sure many of us will have experienced these kind of crunchy times in our lives. But this was very, very intense. So there I was, attempting to sit up. It was before the days of these posh hospital beds that prop you up. So, I had pillows and stuff, but I was just trying to stay upright. And the hours were passing very, very slowly.
Wow. Yeah, no sleep.
No sleep,
Wow,
yeah.
Wow.
And it was I got into this whole big drama in my mind about getting through till the morning when I could lie down again. And the hours were inching past, and I was thinking, I just can't do this, I can't do this. So I had this voice in my head saying, I can't do this, I'm going to go mad, it's impossible, I'm going to go mad, it's too much, I can't bear it. Really, really loud.
Right.
And then another voice saying, no, you can do it, you can do it. No, I can't. Yes, you can. No, I can't. Yes, you can. So there's like two voices completely at war with each other about whether I could do this thing or not. So it was getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter until it was like a point of madness. It really was like being on the brink of madness. And raging physical pain as well. So raging pain, and then this mental pressure cooker. And then at a certain point, another voice came in. And to this day, I have no idea what that voice was, where it came from. But this voice said to me very, very clearly, you don't have to get through till the morning. You just have to live this moment, and this one, and this one, and this one. And it was a bit like a house of cards collapsing. And I knew I could do that.
Wow.
I knew I could do that. And I got through till the morning, obviously.
Right.
And it opened up this kind of profound sense of, well, what was that? What was that experience? And so then it's like, well, what is time? What is time? Because I was trapped in this kind of linear thing of, I'm here and I've got to get through till the morning. But that all just fell apart.
Right.
So what is time? So then as soon as you start to examine what is time, you get what is space.
Yeah.
And then you get, who am I?
Yeah.
You get what is consciousness, you get everything.
Yeah.
And I knew in that moment that I had tasted the truth.
Right.
That it was a bit like everything fell away.
Yes.
And I knew we just have to learn how to be present.
Right.
We just have to learn how to be present.
Right.
And ever since then, that's been my life's work, really. That was in 1985. I can't even do the maths in terms of how long ago that was. But ever since then, that has been my compass. That's how to be present.
And that is so wonderfully described and wonderfully classic in a way that, very often it's spoken about, that awakening experiences emerge from, sometimes, for many people, it's sometimes said for the largest number of people, out of psychological turmoil.
It's interesting.
You come to the end of a way of being. It just no longer works. There's one voice versus the other voice, and it just can't. It just can't. So the house of cards collapses, as you put it.
Because very often, we hear about these experiences being blissful, or amazing, or somehow beyond our reach.
Yes.
But I would say that has been my strongest experience of a different way of being.
Yeah.
And it was forced upon me.
Yeah.
I didn't go chasing it.
No.
It wasn't pleasant.
No.
I always say it rose up out of hell.
Yeah.
I was in absolute hell.
Yeah.
And something cracked open in a way that I'm not sure it would have done.
Yeah.
If it had been a sort of luxury item that I was looking for.
Exactly. Wow, that's beautifully put. Beautifully put. Yeah. And it sounds like you've sort of, you're describing your earlier life as being one of, striving, pushing, trying to get through, make things happen, and that on both previously when you had to be, you were confined to bed, suddenly you had to drop all that. But then you try to use that same approach to get through to the morning, and it just...
Yes, that's interesting.
Just collapsed.
Yeah. And I think, I think these experiences, I said to you before the interview, I'm sort of nervous about the awakening word.
Yeah.
Because it sounds so grand and like I'm saying I'm awakened. I'm not, you know. All I know is I was in absolute hell.
Yes.
And something broke through that had a flavour of truth.
Yes.
Enough to completely change my life.
Yeah.
And to this day I find that mysterious.
Yeah.
Because it completely changed my life. And yet at the time I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
I woke up with these massive questions.
Yeah.
Right. I got through the morning with these huge questions. But it's not like there I was, this tortured girl, and in the morning there I was, this kind of wonderfully sorted person at all. I was still really messed up, really confused, really lost, really bewildered, had my career taken away from me, had my financial security taken away from me, had my health taken away from me. I had nothing, really.
Yeah.
I was broken. It was like I was completely broken. And in a weird sort of way, maybe that had to be my way, because I was so tight and strivey before that. Like for something to get through. I think sometimes people who are pushy, you know, are breaking open, sometimes has to be a little bit messy. Because we're sort of very tightly controlled. I was a very controlled person. But yeah, sort of, so I was broken down and broken open.
Yeah, that's all very beautifully put. And then you're left with these questions. So So the question is, what's time, what's space, who am I? Is there anything else in there? Or
What is consciousness? And then there were a few other experiences while I was in the hospital. I was in hospital for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, I can't remember. And, I had this paralysed bladder, so that was obviously terrifying. And I was young.
Yeah.
And, the doctors come and say, well, it might never recover, but that's fine. Lots of people live with, having to catheterise. And for me, it was like absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
It did actually recover at that point, even though it did stop finally some years later, the bladder function. But they were saying that there wasn't really anything they could do for me medically.
Yeah.
That, there I was. I had the spine. There wasn't a medical solution. I had to learn to live with it. So then they started wheeling out the auxiliary members of the team. I guess they probably saw this young woman, who needed help. So one of the people they sent to see me was the chaplain.
Right.
Which is very interesting. I wasn't religious at the time. And this man came to see me. He was elderly, which I think was significant. Something to do with life experience. He was very, very kind. He held my hand and he said, I want you to remember a time and a place when you were happy. So I took my mind back to the Southern Alps of New Zealand, a place called Paradise, actually, interestingly. And it is like paradise. It's just so beautiful. And I had holidays there before my injuries where I'd been ecstatic, that sort of teenage ecstasy. I would climb up the hill behind our little hut at sunset and just watch the sunsets in absolute awe, just with thinking I was going to explode with, saying, how can it be so beautiful? So I took my mind back there, and then I don't know how long he did that little practice with me for, maybe 10 minutes, came back, and I felt different. Same girl, same hospital bed, nothing had changed apart from what I'd done with my mind.
Right.
So that blew my mind.
Yeah,
it was like, oh my God. I have this kind of capacity within me where I can change my subjective experience depending on what I do with my attention.
Right.
And up till that point, I'd never really thought about having a mind. Do you know what I mean? You just go through your life and you just take it all for granted. But this experience that I felt completely different, and all I'd done is turn my attention to a particular thing. And this particular thing in this instance was happiness and awe and beauty and wonder. And so then I thought, I want to train my mind. So that was, in a way, that was another very profound experience of, oh my God, I have a mind.
Right.
And I can do something with this mind.
Yeah.
I don't have to just, it's not. I'm not a victim of my awareness, my mind, but I can train my mind to help me manage my situation. And as I'm speaking to you now, I've never thought about this before, but it was probably very significant that what I'd done with my mind has placed it upon awe and wonder, which of course is a very opening experience. I think probably what I was experiencing watching the sunsets was, again, this kind of opening to something that's much, much bigger than just my little narrow life.
Yeah.
So then I knew that I wanted to meditate, which is also really, I didn't know anyone who meditated then. But I said, they all sent this amazing social worker to see me. This really beautiful Pacific Island woman, really big, who was just like a mother figure. She was full of love. And when I say she's big, why am I saying that? She was kind of abundant. She was like an embodiment of abundance and love. And my relationship with my mother was a little bit difficult at that time. So she was a significant figure. So I said to her, look, I really want to learn to meditate. Can you get me some tapes from the library? So when I go home, I can meditate. And, this was the days of cassette tapes.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like I'm a really ancient person saying this. And so in a way, that's interesting as well, though, isn't it? Like, I knew I needed to meditate.
Yeah.
I didn't know anyone that meditated.
Oh.
But I knew that I wanted to harness the power of my mind.
Right.
So time and space had sort of collapsed.
Yep.
How do I learn to be present? And then, okay, I can do something with my mind that changes my subjective experience. So, okay, good, let's train that.
Right.
And then I had another experience. I had another two experiences that were very significant. One was where I looked out over Auckland. I was in Auckland Hospital. I was very, very weak, very, very frail. And it's like the city got all kind of shimmery and like there was a veil. And I felt I could die. Right. And to this day, I have no idea whether I could literally have died. But everything got very thin.
Right.
And I felt I had a choice. And I really felt I had a choice. I could just let go.
Yeah.
I could just, and it wouldn't have been a big thing, but just the kind of slipping away. I felt I could just slip away. And I felt I had a choice, and I chose life.
Right.
I thought, no, I do want to live.
Yeah.
And again, up till then, I don't think I'd ever really chosen life.
Right.
I just took it for granted.
Yeah, I mean, who does?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's lovely. Yeah.
And so since then, in a way, I feel I've been in this active choosing of life rather than just sort of existing.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, choose life. And I'm also struck by, the two significant people that you're describing. You're describing their attitudes of just simple love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the chaplain and the social worker. They were beautiful people.
Yeah,
beautiful. Very accepting, very loving.
Yeah. No big deal.
No big
Pretty
deal.
simple about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Humble. Kind.
Gosh, an extraordinary time.
Yeah, so then I eventually went home from the hospital, and I'd also realised during that time that I really needed to take responsibility for myself. And again, realising I hadn't been doing that.
Yeah.
I'd just been pushing my body and assuming that somebody out there would fix me up. Somebody would, some medical person would fix me.
Right.
And I was getting the message, well, no, it doesn't work like that. I'm afraid it's your body, you have to take responsibility.
Right.
So then I went home and embarked on months of rehab. I was obviously off work, mainly bedridden still, very gradually getting my strength back. And the thing that I had that some people never have is the luxury of time. So I'd always out. I was just kind of lying in my bed looking at the ceiling, watching my mind.
Right.
So I embarked in this very intensive period of mind training. I had my little audio cassettes of meditation. I can't remember what sort they were. And but this immense curiosity about what is this mind I'm carrying around inside me. I learned how to think. I'd take a topic and I'd think it through to the end. Which, interestingly, I'm really poor at now. As I've got busier, that's become more difficult. And then, of course, the modern world with multiple stimuli. But there was a kind of sweetness to lying in bed, just thinking things through to the end. I was very intense.
Whoa. Well, I
was a very intense person.
When you think, your body's big time let you down. You've discovered your mind in that dramatic experience and interested in what the heck is this thing? This mind. So, wow, I'm in a really rich period now of exploring, discovering, playing with the mind that you have. Just wonderful.
And then another interesting thing about that time is my pride had been smashed up. And I think that's also very helpful in a certain kind of way. Like I knew that I did not know how to live my life. that was clear. So pushing myself, I completely bombed. I just burned myself out. This mind that I had was very untrained. I knew that. So I didn't know how to make a living, didn't know how to live in this body, didn't know how to sort of be a decent human beyond what was sort of innate. But that meant that I was very open. I was very receptive, and I read widely all kinds of things, all kinds of alternative things and complementary things and mainstream things and spiritual things, Jung, and I wasn't reading about Buddhism at that point, but things about opening the mind.
Right.
And the fact that I was very clear that I had no idea how to really be human. That was quite helpful because it made me more receptive.
Yeah. How many people have that insight? It's a very common condition, but how many people have that insight and recognize that actually I don't know how to do this thing? I'm just doing it. I'm just running on automatic.
Yeah. And I suppose oftentimes we think we do know that, which means we're not receptive to something outside the box. Whereas I was, I tried all kinds of different healing things. Famously, at one point I was drinking my own wee, apparently. My mother reminded me of that. Because I obviously read somewhere that was good for you. So I was really willing to try virtually anything. And it was it was a big adventure. It's quite good going into these things thinking, being really open to the fact that this person might know more than me. Probably does know more than me. So let's listen.
Right.
Whereas I think often we sort of think we know best. Whereas I was absolutely certain that I did not know best. And then eventually I had this friend Warwick who was a bit of a fellow traveller. He'd try anything. So he said to me eventually he was going on a yoga weekend and did I want to go? So I said, yeah, I'll come. I was a bit more mobile by then. Again, it was very full on, my God. It was at an ashram. So we had to drive to this place in the country, in these big dorms, get up at like 5 a.m, do an hour or something of yoga, then meditate on these tiny little cushions, no posture instruction.
Ooh.
And, my back was terrible. I was so stiff. So I sort of did it with an agony.
Wow.
And then the head guy came and found me later on that day and he said, you do seem to be rather stiff. So he asked me what was going on. So I said, well, I've got a fused spine. So he said, oh, okay. And then he gave me some instruction. And but one of the things I learned that weekend is I couldn't leave because I didn't have any transport. So I was stuck at this place. Absolute agony. We had to do some working in the gardens after breakfast. And I still remember lying between the cabbages, these rows of cabbages, lying on my back, looking at the sky, just sobbing.
Oh.
And like, oh God, I want to go home. Oh. And then, but I couldn't leave. And so I sort of stuck it out for the weekend. And something had shifted over that weekend. So again, there was a lesson there about not giving up.
Right.
And actually, I did feel a bit more flexible by the end of the weekend. And I thought, there's something in this. And the meditation was good. So then I started doing yoga more regularly and gradually, got my strength, got my flexibility. And I loved the yoga actually, and I loved the meditation that they did. And then, I don't know, after a year or something, Warwick said, oh, I'm going on a Buddhist weekend, do you want to come? So I said, oh yeah, I'll come. So then I went off to a weekend at this place on the shores of Auckland Harbour, really beautiful, with the Triratna Buddhist community. And it was brilliant. Yeah, it was brilliant. And I thought, oh yeah, this is my way.
And what was brilliant? What was it that hooked you in there?
Well, I'm glad you've asked that. It wasn't the teachings. I didn't understand the teachings. So it wasn't the doctrine, it was the people.
Right.
It was the people. And at the yoga place, I loved it there, but there was something a bit off about the relationship between the head guy and the students, a little bit humiliating, sort of, breaking the ego down in a sort of unpleasant way. And I knew that that never sat quite right with me.
Right.
And then when I went to this Triratna retreat, everyone was really warm, really friendly. There wasn't any kind of weird stuff like that going on. You know, this sort of power play, there wasn't any of that. People were extraordinarily ordinary. And I'd never before that time met people who were comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah.
God, it was magnificent.
Yeah,
They were just being themselves.
Just being themselves.
Some of them were a bit odd, never mind. Some of them were lovely. We laughed a lot. We went swimming. And I was captivated.
That is so interesting. You know, I have a very similar experience. And it was your partner, husband, I don't know what you call him these days.
Yeah. Husband, yeah.
Husband, Sona. Your husband, Sona, was in fact one of the first people I met. And he and a couple of other guys who are running the event were just so easy with each other. They just teased each other. No one took it seriously. They joked. No one took it themselves very seriously. They were just easy. And I'd never met people quite so easy with each other, with themselves, at ease, just getting on with it. Really simple. Really, really simple.
And it's beautiful, isn't it?
Blew me away.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
Just so unusual.
Yeah. And then of course I had the thought, you know, I want to be like that when I grow up. Because it's so attractive. And it's so, you know, I was 27 and definitely not grown up. And full of insecurities and, you know, ego and worrying about what people thought of me and all that kind of stuff. And so the embodiment, they embodied the possibility of ease, as you're saying, and just being oneself. So that's really why I've committed to this path. That was in 1987. Again, I can't do the maths, it's decades. And it's always been the community and the people. And then of course you get interested in, well, what's the practices that make people like that? Right. What are the teachings that make people like that?
Right.
But I definitely came in through the exemplification. And it sounds like similar for you.
Very similar. And it sounds to me like you're sort of kind of pursuing some kind of a quest of how shall I be? How shall I be? What am I going to be like in this world? What's it like? What's it going to be like to be me? How shall I be? And you're beginning to nose your way towards that.
I'm very intuitive.
I
think I've always functioned very intuitively. So when I chance upon something, because that was really just Warwick saying, hey, let's go on this weekend. I'm trying anything and everything. So I think, I'm up for that. And then this intuitive knowing of yes.
This is the right path.
And that hospital experience of the moment, that was, I guess, a very intuitive rising up of, it's all about being present. Nothing else exists, really.
Lovely.
That was intuitive.
Yeah.
So I think probably we all have intuitions, and the main thing is learning to listen to them and then to act on them.
Indeed. And I think maybe, and this could take us into an interesting area. I think one of the differences, in some ways temperamentally, between us, is that I find that my own experience has always been driven by a question of what's actually going on. How does reality work? How does the mind work? How come different people have different experiences? Big experiences. I mean, just like I experienced this way, you experience it that way. How come? We're still both humans with different experiences. I get interested in, what makes experience what it is and what lies behind it. And that was something that I was always pursuing. And I don't get the impression that you're quite pushing on that door. You have a different sort of guiding principle. So I wonder if you could maybe illuminate, what would you say if I was to say that was that for me? What's actually going on here? How does reality work? What would your equivalent of that be, would you say?
That's such a great question. I mean, I think in those early days, this, as I said, this intuition that these people have got something.
Yeah.
A recognition, these people have got something. So it's never been that intellectual for me.
Yeah.
Even though I was very intense in those days.
Yeah.
And you know, I moved from New Zealand to England when I was 30 to live in a retreat centre. Lived there for 5 years. So that was a massive thing to do. I had, you know, this body, really bad back, and I just hurled myself from one side of the planet to the other to live in a retreat centre, following this quest. But it's always been, you know, kind of what does it look like in actual sort of lived experience rather than a conceptual looking. And then over the years, what's happened is my guiding principle has become more the sort of loving side of things. So, you know, it's very clear in Buddhism, for example, that sort of wisdom and love are two sides of the same coin.
Right.
So, you know, true wisdom is loving and true love is wise.
Yes.
And so again, this is perhaps why when we were talking before the interview, and I was saying, oh, I'm not really sure about this language of awakening and sort of big experiences. You know, for me, it's all about, well, just being kind. Just be kind, just be nice.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, God, just be nice. Not in a kind of nice, but...
No.
So I don't tend to go down the, you know, in some traditions and for some temperaments, debating sort of these very interesting metaphysical ideas. I used to be much more like that.
Right.
These days, I'm just really not very interested in that. It's more, you know, am I becoming a little kinder? If I have experiences in my practice, which, you know, I do, as we all do, I'm kind of a bit less interested in the experience than the actions that arise out of that experience.
Right.
So, you know, how do I show up in the world? Am I becoming more kinder? Am I more connected? In our Buddhist tradition, when we get ordained, which is a step of commitment, we get given a particular visualization practice. And I took on visualizing a Buddha of love,
Right.
Amitabha. So really, since 1995, when I got ordained, every single day, I sit and I kind of allow in love. And I'm increasingly seeing that as a training. You know, I don't know whether that Buddha actually exists or not. You know, again, I think that's probably not even the right question. But I know if I turn my mind to love, as embodied in the sort of luminous, glorious, sort of boundless, radiant figure, if I spend, you know, an hour a day or something dwelling on that, that has an effect. So I'm more interested in the effect of these experiences.
Indeed.
And so I'm more coming in through that doorway of love more and more and more.
Right.
Because I think that's what the world needs.
That's
it's really what the world needs, and sort of let kind of wisdom take care of itself. You know, if I'm loving not in a sticky way, obviously loving in a way that's really attached. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking more about a sort of mysterious kind of principle that love is everywhere all the time, and we just need to sort of get out of the way, get our kind of sort of clogged up, sticky, stuck, tight, tangled up kind of way of being. Get that out of the way and just relax into this enormous field of love. So that's more what's been very alive for me over the years.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. And what, you know, that's it. It's so grounded and practical and true. And what it does for me, besides just like going, yes, of course, is then I start to think, well, yes, that is the nature of things. It is all interconnected. There is no separation. There is just the ongoing fabric of experiencing. And that means that there's no separation between persons, there's no separation between persons and things, and that means that, well, the emotional, the affective expression of that is love.
But even that, it's the language.
Exactly.
Language is so tricky.
It's so abstract. It's so abstracting, isn't it?
Yeah. So when you say there's no separation, I could imagine watching this video, not having ever studied this, and thinking, well, that's mad. It's obvious you're sitting there and I'm sitting here. So, is he saying it's all a big soup? Is he saying we're sort of merging into a kind of cosmic blob? You know, what is he saying? So, it's so interesting, isn't it?
It is.
So it's like in Buddhism, you get this language of the ultimate and the relative.
Yes.
So sort of ultimately, the way I would look at it is you know, everything is flow and changing. That's kind of one of the really central insights of the Buddha. And again, you don't have to be a Buddhist to see that. If you really reflect very deeply, you won't find anything that's completely static.
No.
So everything is flowing and changing. So I'm sitting here as a flowing and changing kind of pattern, if you like, with my own conditioning and so on. You're sitting over there as your flowing and changing pattern. And if we try to find here, where's the actual boundary between us, we'll never ever find it.
No.
Because you've just got flow. So sometimes when I'm teaching, I use an image of water. So you've got two rivers merging, and one's milky and the other one's dark blue.
Okay.
So it looks like they're really different. And then it looks like there's a line.
Yeah.
But if you climbed into that water, you'd never find it because you've just got process and flow.
Exactly.
But to say that there's no separation from a sort of pragmatic point of view, that's not quite true either, because you're there and I'm here.
Well, we go back to an image that I've used in a previous video of these whirlpools in water, and they're identifiably separate in a way. You can say, well, there's this whirlpool and there's that whirlpool, but next to each other, where do you find the boundary?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where do you find the boundary?
And
where do you find the essence of them?
Yes.
You know, where is the thingness within them?
Yeah.
You can't really.
Yeah. And a classic example, I think, from Zen Buddhism, I'm not sure, is waves on the ocean.
Yeah.
So you've got a wave that starts out there and comes all the way into the shore, and it looks like it's got an identity, a wave.
You can recognise it, you can speak of it.
Exactly. But when it gets to the shore, there's not a single particle of water that's the same as out in the ocean. I think that's a very good metaphor. We're like that. So this idea that, you know, I would preference my well-being over your well-being starts to break down.
Yes.
Starts to break down, because why would I do that?
Yes.
Because we're both this flow of life, just taking slightly different forms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the ways I like to think of that myself sometimes is, which I find very beautiful, that we are both expressions of the radiant nature of reality.
Yes.
Or the radiant nature of awareness. If you imagine there's this kind of luminous, boundless, loving, completely inexpressible non-thing, just kind of way of being or something that's always here, and then it's taking form. And Sangharakshita, our teacher, he talks about how we're all coagulations of the common stream of life, which I think is really accurate. It's not aesthetic, like coagulation. It's really not aesthetic. But I've thought, is there a better way of putting it? And I thought, I really can't think of a better way. Because coagulation, it's a bit like we're just flowing along. And then we sort of congeal around our habits.
Yes.
And then when we're really not in touch with this natural open way of being, we might clot.
Right.
And then we might scab. Get really crusty.
Yes.
And then that can all dissolve back into fluid. Yes. So I think it's very accurate.
That's nice. That's really nice. That's really, really nice. And what I'm loving about this conversation is this sense I'm getting of you coming from a sort of feeling for love, feeling for simplicity, feeling for pragmatic, getting on with it. Let's try and find a decent way of being in the world. Let's try to be a bit kinder. I come at life, and I have always, I think, from a much more abstracted, conceptual, to some extent, what's really going on here perspective. And yet we arrive at a very common understanding, a very shared sense of how things actually are. And that really illuminates for me that this idea that, well, you come at this in your way, for what works for you, in line with your temperament. Figure your way. Figure your way.
I think that's really good, because what can happen, I think, for some of us is we think that it looks a certain way. This journey of awakening, using that word reservedly, this journey of becoming more alive, becoming freer, becoming more loving, more kind, more clear, more intellectually curious, whatever it might be, that there's no universal template.
No.
You know. Again, I think in the Buddha said somewhere there's 85,000 doorways to the Dharma. And I think the metaphor there, if you talk to 85,000 people, it'll be a slightly different doorway for each person. And it's really great that you have your way. And again, that's a common way, isn't it, for many people, the more abstract, thinking it through, really being curious, and then we end up at the same place. How to be present, how to be wise, how to be kind, how to be connected, how to see into rigidity, how to let go, how to relax. But I've certainly ended up, I think you summed it up very well, very kind of grounded, pragmatic. What works? If it works, do it. If it doesn't work, don't. Try to be aware, assess, and if something's not working, why not? Think about it, reflect. But just try and be a decent human.
That's lovely.
As much as possible.
Oh, thank you so much for all of this so far. It's really, really great. I'm interested though in, you've been practicing for a long time, and some of that's been very, very intense. So I'm sure that as you've gone along, various experiences must have shown up at different times that have informed the kind of path you've taken. I'd be really interested to hear some of those.
Good. So, I'm happy to share some with some caveats. The caveats being, I think as soon as, in my own experience and also in my reading, as soon as you think I've had a big experience, then you've lost something. Because there's a grasping, or there's an identification with the experience, and who had the experience anyway, and what is the experience. And as I've been saying, I'm more interested in how do I live my life. Nonetheless, I have had experiences, and I think sometimes it can be helpful to hear about that from other people as a source of faith, if you like. So I think, and the other thing that's very interesting is some people have big experiences, like big wow experiences. And I think some people don't, because we're temperamentally different. And obviously I had that massive experience when I was 25. That was hellish. Very, broke through, but it wasn't like, oh, look at me, I'm having a big blissy thing at all. And I think I'm sort of quite steady. I think I've just had drip over many, many years of just gradual getting more comfortable in this body, being able to work with the physical pain, because that's been a massive journey. How do you meditate in a body that hurts all the time? Learning to soften around that, because I think again I used to push. Sometimes I remember giving a talk about my meditation practice and saying initially it was very much escapist. I was trying to get from here to there. And again, this is maybe why I'm slightly nervous about this language of big experiences or awakenings, because that's over there. I'm here as this little person who doesn't like themselves very much. I want to be there having this big experience. As soon as you got that, it's a highway to hell, because you're not actually with yourself. And then eventually I had a big realization that I was going about it all in the wrong way. And I just needed to learn how to be here. So then I went through a whole long period of practice about getting from there to here. So rather than trying to go away from my experience, well, how do I just keep on coming back? Nice. Which, of course, is an echo of that hospital experience.
Yeah.
You know, how do I just learn how to be content and here and present? So this continual kind of softening around the body. And then more of a phase of not even identifying with here, but just being present.
Yeah.
And more open and more expansive. And then holding it all much more lightly.
Yeah.
So then this idea of sort of playing everywhere. So a bit like going from here to there, then there to here, then contented in a broader here, and then just playing everywhere. Just responding to whatever arises with a much more flexible mind. So there has been a big journey, but it's not been like big wow experiences. And then going back to something more closed down. But it's gradual. And so probably my sort of experience, just my everyday experience when I meditate now, 30 years ago would have been a big wow.
Yeah.
But now it's like, I enjoy it. I look forward to meditating, which I certainly did not do 30 years ago. It was an endurance thing.
Right.
You know, I'd sit there with sweat pouring off me. You know, just an agony. Whereas now it's pleasurable, it's enjoyable. So that's a massive shift. But it's not like there's been a big thing. It's more, again, there's a lovely story from the Zen tradition of how practice can build, where you're going for a walk on a misty day and you start off from home and you're dry, and when you come back you're drenched. But you don't know when it actually happened.
No.
You're in a completely different state, but you've just been walking around in the mist. So I think it's been a little bit more like that for me, which I trust. I think in a way I trust that more than if I'd had massive, big openings and then fallen back into being closed down, just this gradual process. But I did have an experience. I was on a solitary retreat up at my Squin, which is where my friend Subhuti and Srimala had a beautiful sort of hermitage up in Snowdonia, pretty wild. And always windy, almost always windy. So I decided to make my practice sitting outside on a bench in the wind and to feel the wind blowing through me as if there was nothing getting in the way.
Right.
No snagging, because the mind, the ego, we snag against things. There's things we don't like that we push away. There's things that we like that we grasp after. Yeah. The mind is chasing things, and then we close down, and everything gets a bit. Yeah, I think snagging is a good word. You know, when you got wool and your fingernail catches on the wool and you pull out a thread.
Yeah.
So we're doing that all the time with life. We're just snagging against things, and we get all these kind of rough edges, and then we don't like the rough edges, and then we start fighting with those. And anyway, I just was sitting there, just imagining there was nothing getting in the way. That I was like translucent. Like the me was just translucent and the wind was just blowing through. That was very beautiful. Very beautiful kind of training again. So it wasn't like I was sitting in the wind and then suddenly I had this big opening. It was more that I turned my mind to, let's see what it's like to train myself to not snag against experience. And just let it flow.
Just let it be.
Just let it be. And that was very deep, I think.
Yeah, very. Yeah.
And then I had a slightly similar thing when I was on a retreat in Spain. It was a retreat where we were ordaining other women. Very, very positive, very beautiful place. And to get from the retreat centre to the shrine room, there's a walk on a mountain path. Now that's very difficult for me. So I could do it with my splints and my crutches, but it's pretty precarious. I was totally up for it, of course. It was an adventure. But nonetheless, there was a lot of attention involved in not falling off the cliff.
Good.
And again, I felt very spacious inside and very spacious outside. So I had these words came to me. walking along a mountain path, space moving through space. So the inner space and the outer space were kind of merging. And again, the edges weren't very strong. And then I had this question, who chooses? So walking along a mountain path, space moving through space, who chooses? So the who choosing was related to the fact that there was a lot of attention and choice. Every single step involved a choice. You know, put my foot here rather than there, because if I put my foot there, I'll fall off the mountain. If I put my foot there, I won't fall off the mountain. So I'll put it there. So there was a lot of choice, but I was mystified. Well, what's the process of choice when it's all just flow? Space moves space. So what is this process of choice? So then I got very conceptual about it and obsessive. Like, what is this process? And I started reading all these Dharma books that were in the retreat centre. What's the process of choice? Who's choosing? If there's no autonomous, independent me in here, who's choosing? So I got myself in a right pickle about that. And then a few days later, I was walking along and there was a development of my little slogan. Walking along a mountain path, space moving through space. Who cares who chooses? And the whole thing just collapsed. The whole thing fell away. And I thought, it just doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. The fact is, you're clearly not falling off the mountain. That's good.
Yep.
And you've got all this tension. That's good. It's very spacious and honest. And very spacious and open. That's fine. Do not get into a conceptual wrangle about something that's taking you away from the experience. Just stay with the experience. Keep it simple, because it's coming back to this pragmatic thing. So sort of, and the who cares who chooses had two different tones. I could say it in two different ways. Like, who cares who chooses? Like, who cares? It doesn't matter. And then who cares who chooses is like another layer of this kind of quest for the self. Like, who's driving this thing? And of course, that you can just go into infinite regression with that.
Exactly.
And I thought, just drop it. Just drop that conceptualization. Drop the thought. Just stay with the experience.
Yes.
So that was very beautiful.
That's lovely.
And sort of freeing, kind of liberating in a certain way. Just drop it. Just walk along a mountain path. That's it. Just walk along the path. So that was good. And there's a sort of this has been something I've, any experiences that I've felt they really have got the taste of something I can trust and the taste of truth or whatever, to whatever degree, they're always simple. In my experience, they're always simple. And it's a bit like I've been staring you in the face the whole time. Walk along a mountain path, that's it.
That's it.
That's it. So always very, very simple. It's like, in the tradition, it's like you can't see your own eyeball, it's too close. So the sense of simple presence and love is too close. So we go chasing off all over the place.
And creating selves. Creating selves. We're in this self that chooses. Well, is there a self that chooses? No. I mean, who made that up? I mean,
but there is a process of choice, and for me,
choice.
That remains deeply mysterious.
Choice.
And
it's choice. It's choice. And it's how the pattern works.
How the pattern works. Yeah.
It's how things work. It's fine. This is what it is.
This is what it is.
Choices are made. Fine. Yeah,
and I think what we're getting into here is it's very hard to talk about these things. Yeah. And someone said, I can't remember who it was, but he said, as soon as you open your mouth, you're wrong. Which I think is very good. Because I'm saying all these things to you, and I've got another voice in my head, listening, thinking it's all approximation. It's impossible to really articulate it.
It's exactly right. And yet, and this is really important for me, if our spiritual ancestors hadn't opened their mouths, we'd be lost.
I know, exactly. And that's why, I did agree to do this interview, even though I had doubts because of you know, the impossibility of articulating these things, and the potential for misunderstanding is so vast. You know, that I'm saying I'm something that I'm not, perhaps, or you and I are pretending that we know what we're talking about, which you know we do to some degree, but it's all everything. Whatever you say, you could contradict, because everything you're saying, everything we say is kind of hard-edged, because language is like that.
Yes.
So then you have to counter it with the opposite all the way along.
Exactly.
And I totally agree. I mean, I love reading spiritual biographies.
Yes.
Whenever I go on retreat, my main reading is spiritual biographies.
Right.
Because I find it incredibly inspiring. I find it encouraging.
Yeah.
I love hearing about people's struggles. I love hearing about their progress.
Yes.
So, you know, how do we talk about these things without being grandiose? How do we talk about these things without diminishing the fact that progress is made?
Yeah.
You know, and I've been meditating since 1985. It would be very disappointing if there hadn't been any progress.
Indeed. And let me reassure you that you're doing a pretty good job of talking about these things without being grandiose. I promise you.
Good,
you really are.
good. Well, that's good.
And we both agree that neither of us is awakened. And it seems like we're also agreeing that both of us at different times have had experiences that have changed us.
Yes.
And that are important to us.
Yes. And I think everybody does.
Exactly.
Everybody does.
Exactly.
And part of the training is to listen deeply.
Yes.
I think it is the listening, you know, because I think it's always happening. So really listening, and then valuing without attachment. Now that is really tricky.
Yes.
Because as soon as you get something, you think, oh, I'm getting somewhere.
Yes.
Then you want more of it, and then the whole thing goes away. I often think it's like, you know, you see a little something out the corner of your eye. You know, that experience, and then when you look, it goes away. I think these experiences are often like that.
Exactly. And some of the art here is to be able to allow something to be rich, allow it to be an important experience, and then just get on with it.
Yeah, exactly. And the getting on, in my worldview, if you like, it's the getting on with it. That's the most important thing.
It's much more important.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't get on with it, you just diminish it.
You're just having these experiences.
It's a waste of time.
Yeah, it's a waste of time. Yeah.
It's a waste of time. Lovely. And a big piece of your getting on with things has been the creation of Breathworks. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about Breathworks, where it came from, what it's done, what it's about.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, so Breathworks is it's a charity. We work internationally now, and we're offering, in a way, mind training skills, heart training skills to people who live with illness and pain and associated stress.
Right.
So our core work is pain and illness, but we've broadened it out really to anybody over the years. And how did it come about? That's a really great question. So there I was, you know, I've talked already about moving to the retreat centre when I was 30, I had 5 years there. Then I left there, then I had another big crisis with my back. I got into being too pushy again. Then my bowel and my bladder both packed up. My mobility deteriorated. Another big crisis, you know, more or less housebound again, you know, thinking, what on earth has gone on? I've been meditating for 10 years and here I am back, you know, Groundhog Day. Have I not learned anything? And that's probably the closest I've come to being depressed. You know, just the sense of, oh God, I've done it again. You know, what have I not understood? What have I not understood? And I am fairly good at reflecting. You know, I take these questions, what have I not understood? And I do really mind them in my awareness. And there were two things I hadn't understood. One was, how could I do my awareness practice off the cushion? So how could I take all the training into my daily life?
Right.
Because it's all very well to meditate for 40 minutes a day, but if you've got really bad habits the rest of the day, that's going to impact your whole life. And I did have bad habits. These habits have been driven and pushy and strivey. And then what happens is, of course, is your meditation practice essentially becomes a salvage operation of the wreckage of the day before. So you're not really meditating. You're just sitting there thinking, oh God, I'm so tired and I've done it again and I'm so strained and I'll just kind of relax a bit, breathe, you know. and then that's your practice. Well, that's not really going to take you much deeper. I quite like that expression, that it becomes a salvage operation of the wreckage of the day before.
It's lovely.
And I'm sure many people relate to that. So then I did a lot of training around mindfulness in daily life, which was very, very powerful for me. Learning to use a timer, so timing my activities so I wouldn't just keep on going until I was absolutely exhausted.
Right.
If I went swimming, never swimming more than 20 lengths, rather than if I go one day and I feel good, I might do 40 lengths and then I'm wrecked again. So just being much more boundaried. And then I also read Full Catastrophe Living by Jon Kabat Zinn, which had a huge impact on me. So Jon Kabat Zinn is the person who brought mindfulness into Western healthcare in the 70s. And this is kind of Bible, brilliant book. It's a really fat book. But one of the things he talks about very, very well is turning towards your experience. So if you've got pain, how can you engage with the pain? How can you change your relationship to the pain? And of course, up till then, as I said earlier, I'd been using my meditation practice to get away from the pain.
Right.
So to get from here to there, I had this fantasy over here of some sort of blissy, lovely, pain-free existence. So my meditation practice was trying to get to this lovely, idealized fantasy state. Never succeeding, of course. So then feeling I was failing at meditation, so then trying harder. So that becomes the kind of strivey thing. So reading Jon's book, I was like, I need to completely change the way I'm doing this and learn how to just be with this body, learn how to change my relationship with the pain. So I really diligently engaged with his approach, found it life-changing. And probably I would have trained in his program, MBSR.
Right.
But at that point, you had to go and do an internship in America for 3 months.
Right.
I couldn't do that. I didn't have the health and I didn't have the money.
Right.
So then I thought, well, I better see if I can make up something myself. Because I thought I'm not going to just poach his program by reading his book, because that would have been really unethical. I went on some training with him, which was brilliant. He came to the UK, so I did a retreat with him. So then I kind of took elements of his work and then added in elements from my own training, because I really wanted to see if I could help other people in my situation. Yeah. So I've done a lot of this work around putting the last piece of the jigsaw in, really. I knew how to work with my mind to some extent. I was working with my body, and now it was taking it off the cushion, metaphorically, and learning to work with my direct experience. And so then I was really interested in, could I come up with something that would help other people? Right. Because it had been so lonely. My journey had been so lonely. Thinking back to that girl in the hospital bed. Yeah, the chaplain was amazing, the social worker were amazing, but really, I have had to figure it out for myself. Yeah.
And even with your Buddhist friends, they're not dealing with what you're dealing with.
No, at that point, most of my Buddhist friends were roughly my age. There were some older people, but a lot of people weren't. We weren't at that point really an aging community. Yeah. So people tried to help me work with my pain, but I didn't really get any. People were very, very kind, but in terms of how do you actually do it, I had to figure it out myself. Very, very lonely, very hard. And I thought, it'd be so great if I could come up with something so it would be easier for other people. It wouldn't take them 20 years, whatever it took me. So I knew I couldn't do Jon's program, so I took elements from his. I couldn't do his program because I wasn't trained. Took elements from his, and then my own training in Triratna. And in Triratna, I'd always been taught to alternate mindfulness of breathing one day and loving kindness practice the next. And I found that brilliant. So a complete balance of awareness practice and love practice. So I thought I'm going to design a program based on those two equal principles, which was slightly different from MBSR. And then I'd done all this work around pacing, learning how to really manage your body in daily life. So I did a very extended module on that. So I did develop this program, very rough and ready initially. I was absolutely knackered. My back was really awful then. exhausted a lot of the time, but just trying to pull something together. And then I applied for a grant from the Millennium Commission. This was the point where the government still had money to give away. And the grant was for disabled people that wanted to contribute to the community. And I thought, well, I'm one of those people. So I applied for this grant. It was very small, I can't remember. It might have been £8,000 or something to pilot this program, essentially. And I put an ad in the local paper in Manchester, and I was inundated.
Wow.
Which I found shocking, because I had no idea there were lots of people like me out there.
Wow.
Because it was free. You know, I think we got like 50 inquiries or something in the first couple of days.
Wow.
And I used some of the money to employ an assistant a few hours a week, Jan, as she was in now OCD, and since she got ordained. So we just started running these courses in Manchester. As I said, it was all a bit rough and ready. I didn't feel very confident, but it was very clear quite quickly that it worked.
Right.
That this principle of training the mind, training the heart, softening, coming into the body, learning how to manage daily life, and then we were building community, because people would come once a week for 8 weeks. So strong emphasis on care, community, little things like when people did the body scan, we'd tuck them in. We'd go round, give them a blanket and tuck them in. Little things like that had a huge impact. So then I found it very inspiring and very, very moving. And another thing that I think is very significant in all this is I'd been really stuck at home, you know, probably for 3 years, you know, and tremendous pain. I was in a community with friends, so I was in a loving environment, but nonetheless, my life was pretty diminished. And part of my motivation for founding Breathworks was doing something for other people.
Yeah.
I thought, I need to get out more. I'm a bit too in my own head. I need to just do something for others, get out of the house, get out more, think of others. And I think partly why Breathworks has succeeded is maybe because of that initial motivation was quite altruistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to do something, you know, for me, but it was a lot. I wanted to broaden my horizons, broaden my world, get out of my bedroom, you know, get out of my little north-facing room in Manchester, which was pretty grim, do something for others and see what happened. And I immediately started receiving so much, you know, getting energy from the other people, delighting in the other people. So pretty quickly I thought, yeah, this thing's got legs.
Yeah.
Then the following year I had more major surgery. So then I was pretty much out of action for a year. And then the following year I got back to doing it, and then I got joined by friends, one of whom was you. So you were doing mindfulness at university at that point, and you and Gary and Sona, Ratnaguna and Sona, you I can't remember the exact order of it at all, but my experience was these 3 amazing guys, been meditating, you know, years longer than me, wanted to work with me, wanted to help me. I mean, it was overwhelming. You know, I was really struggling physically, and suddenly the cavalry came and said, hey, we could really do something great for the world. And we sat around at my little table. I was living in a little sort of cabin in the garden by then, and we were dreaming the dream. And one of them was, what will we call it? And then you came up with the name Breathworks. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, Breathworks, and it stuck. Yeah, so that was amazing. And then, you know, you went off and did other things, and the others stayed working with me. And after a couple of years after that, I guess we had the insight that 3 people working in Manchester, you know, maybe we're going to help, you know, 50 people a year, something like that. And by then I knew the stats. And the stats are that 1 in 5 of us live with chronic pain.
Wow.
About 1 in 3 of us live with a long-term health condition.
Wow.
It's millions, it's billions globally.
Yeah.
So we made the decision to become a teacher training organisation as well as a sort of delivery organisation.
Right.
So using the trickle-down method, you know, we train other people and they go out and deliver the courses, and then ultimately they can train other people and so on. So that was about 2004, 2005, I think.
Right.
Yeah, and now I think we've got 700 teachers in 40 countries, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been an amazing journey. I've been doing it 23 years now, 24 years, and I still love it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm definitely moving into another phase of my life, without a doubt. I'm in my mid-60s. I've moved to this beautiful place in the country, and there's a massive oak tree in the garden, probably 500 years old. I kind of just want to go and sit under the oak tree all day long. I feel I'm moving into something that is a kind of yielding quality, a letting go quality. But I still really, you know, I'm still involved in Breathworks. I still love it. But, you know, we're sort of trying to succession plan a bit now.
Yeah.
But I still feel very in touch with my initial motivation.
Yes.
And the initial motivation was super simple. It was, I want to help people.
Yeah.
I want to help people, and I still want to help people.
Yeah.
And that's what gives me joy.
Yeah. And wow, I mean, 700 teachers worldwide. That's quite a start. That's quite a start. And it's not that difficult for a teacher to work with 1,000 people, 1,200 people. You're starting to touch the lives potentially of millions of people here. This is really fantastic.
Yeah, and then of course I've written 3 books now, but the second book, Mindfulness for Health, is the 8-week course that we offer.
Right.
And I think that's in 17 languages or something. So of course that's all over the world.
That's very
as well.
Wow.
And then I get these emails from people. It's so moving. I got one yesterday from a woman who's working in Sierra Leone,
right,
and training up a whole lot of people in Sierra Leone.
Wow.
You know, it's having a real impact in situations where people's lives are difficult.
Yeah. And right at the heart of the whole thing, there's this altruistic intent. We just want to help people.
Yeah, definitely.
We just want to help people.
Yeah,
so that just ripples out and ripples out.
Yeah, and it's very pure and it's very simple and amazing team.
Yeah.
We've just got a new guy who's come in as the chief exec, and I know he's really blown away by the heart of the team.
Yes.
And he says he can see with everyone it's a vocation.
Yeah. That is just wonderful. Yeah. And so, and of course, not only have you got an amazing team with a wonderful motivation, but you've also got people who themselves are trained and training in working with their own minds and working with their hearts. And that's quite potent.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we've done at Breathworks, I'm not exactly sure how we've managed this, but you know, obviously I'm an ordained Buddhist, and for me the view is infinite and boundless. When I say the view, I mean the kind of vision of what's possible.
Yeah.
Is of, you know, completely freeing the mind from contracted states.
Right.
And resting in this sort of boundless, luminous, radiant, loving awareness that's not a thing but is an experience. Yeah.
Right.
So that's there.
Yes.
And then Breathworks is part of the so-called secular mindfulness movement.
Yes.
Which is, you know, where you can, because it's not religious, you can take it into lots of domains like education and healthcare and all these kinds of things. But, you know, I use my Buddhist name, Vidyamala, which people don't particularly comment on. I don't think it's seen as that weird, I don't think. And so I think, you know, what we've been able to do at Breathworks, and we could make it more conscious, I think, is keep taking people deeper.
Yes.
So we run retreats, and, you know, Sona and I led a retreat a couple of years ago for Breathworks community on what's called the hindrances and the awakening factors.
Right.
Which comes from the Buddhist tradition. So, but again, it's universal. It's the mind. So the hindrances are what are the patterns that close us down.
Yes.
And the awakening factors are what are the patterns that open us up.
Right.
So we're able to take people deeper and intimate towards this kind of what I call blue sky mind.
Yeah.
You know, we can take them there.
Yeah.
And that's quite delicate. How do you tread that territory?
Exactly, and that territory is exactly the territory of this series of recordings.
Yes.
This is exactly what I'm interested in.
Yes.
You know, the mindfulness work that both of us have engaged in, you more in, certainly with greater coverage than myself by far. In a way, it takes people on an 8-week journey. Now, I love the fact that you've created a community that people join and they can keep coming back for more. But generally speaking, it's kind of rather limited.
Yeah.
And the intention of these methodologies that we're sharing was liberation. Yeah. It was awakening. It was far greater than, managing distress, although that is unbelievably valuable. Absolutely cherish its capacity to do that, and huge respect that people like yourself and various others have over the years put so much put so much into helping people work more skillfully with their minds and alleviate their distress. Fantastic. And there is so much more available, so much more possible. So I'm really, really keen on talking about the more that is possible now that there's an opening for it. And whereas I've got huge respect for the Buddhist tradition, I'm also aware that there are many, many people who've engaged with the mindfulness world who wouldn't want to go to a Buddhist center, who don't want to use Buddhist terminology to apply to their experience, who don't want the kind of training that you and I have benefited so much from. So how can we create a language and a way of talking and a way of thinking and a way of practicing which can go further and further and further without creating these kind of language barriers, if you like, or conceptual barriers. And that's the experiment, if you like.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying, and I think developing the Breathworks work has definitely deepened my practice.
Yes,
because I've had to really understand, what the Buddha meant by certain Pali or Sanskrit terms.
Yes.
Like sati or karuna, it's a word for compassion. Because I have to translate those into universal language that anyone can understand.
Yes.
Taking the principles, because the principles are brilliant. Like in Buddhism, we've got 2,500 years of mind training and heart training to draw on, which is an extraordinary tradition of depth.
Yes.
Of what is awareness,
yes.
what is the heart,
Yeah.
But I can't just rely on trotting out these foreign language terms. I have to think, what does that mean, and how can I translate that?
Yeah.
So that someone in the class who's a Christian or a Muslim or someone with no faith, who's suffering, can benefit from that.
Yeah.
But I think as we were saying earlier, right at the beginning of this interview, that we kind of got on the path because of the people.
Yes.
So I think community is probably really, really important.
It is.
And at Breathworks, we've done that. That's one of the things I'm really proud of, is we've now got this online platform. We call it a community of practice. 7,000 members.
Right.
I've been leading a meditation every Tuesday night since something like the 20th of March 2020. Get 100 people or so every week. We offer lots of different courses. There's discussion boards, there's forums, there's groups. I think for people to really go deeper, they need community.
Yeah.
I think to do it in isolation is really, really hard.
This is really.
And we were saying earlier on about one of the things we really value about True Rightness. We're really good at that. We're really good at Sangha, the quality of community.
Yes.
So I think maybe one of the reasons why Breathworks has done pretty well.
Yeah.
We're still here after 23 years. We've survived a global financial crisis. We've survived Brexit. We've survived a pandemic. We've survived a cost of living crisis that's been really touch and go at times, but we're still here. We've got this loving, engaged committed community.
Yeah.
And we can take them on this journey of opening. Yeah. And sometimes I say, you know, in essence, maybe what it is that we're doing is we're training people to notice, are you doing this? Or are you doing this? That's it.
That's it.
You know, are you closing down or are you opening up?
Yeah.
And that's just a journey. You know, if you're opening up, then you can open a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and then, wow, you know, something bigger happens. Then you get a little glimpse of blue sky mind or luminous awareness, whatever. And then we're there as community to support that process. But I think that's a good metaphor. You know, are you doing this? Are you doing this?
That's beautiful.
And you don't need any words around that. That's just a gesture.
Exactly.
That's a gesture of awakening, I think.
Well, thank you very much. This has been really, really valuable, really illuminating.
Well, thank you so much. Really wonderful to talk to you and you know, to feel our way, into it all, because it's tricky.
Yeah.
You know, what you're trying to do is tricky. You know, how do you take the mindfulness thing deeper? Yeah. What I'm trying to do at Breathworks is tricky, but we're both deeply committed and you know, help people see what's just sitting here right in front of us. It's so close to us, it's like our eyeball. Yeah.